not being nurtured and built upon as they progress through the system.
We need to make sure that we're not just focused on that early learning, which we've already established is super important, but that those gains are maintained and built upon.
Right. Like, how do we keep that momentum going?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it makes you think, we've been talking about Malaysia compared to other countries, but you brought up Vietnam earlier. And I think that's such a fascinating comparison to make
It is.
because you have these two countries that are on very different economic paths.
Right.
And yet Vietnam is making some really remarkable strides in education.
Yeah, it's kind of like comparing a speedboat to a sailboat.
Okay. I like that analogy.
They both can get you where you need to go, but they take different approaches.
Right.
And it's Vietnam, that sailboat. Like, that's outpacing Malaysia in terms of learning outcomes.
It's true. And it makes you wonder, how is that even possible? How can a country with arguably fewer resources be doing so well?
I think it really speaks to strategic decision making
Okay.
and this unwavering focus on education. They basically said, this is a priority for us and we're going to invest in it.
So it's not just about how much money you're putting in, it's where you're directing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've really prioritized those foundational skills like literacy, numeracy. They've recognized that those are the building blocks
Right.
for all future learning.
You got to have the foundation before you can build the house.
Exactly. And they've invested heavily in teacher training and developing a really strong curriculum.
So they're supporting the teachers. They're giving them what they need to be successful.
And they've created this culture of high expectations.
Right. High expectations for everyone, for the students, for the educators, for the system itself.
Exactly. And what's also really fascinating is that it's not just coming from the top down, right? There's this deep-rooted belief within Vietnamese society that education is the key.
Oh, interesting.
It's the key to individual and national progress. So you have this bottom-up support as well.
It's like the stars are aligned. The government is on board. The people are on board. Everyone's working together.
Exactly. And while, every country's context is different, there are definitely transferable lessons here for Malaysia. Right. It's about taking these best practices and saying, how can we adapt these?
Right. Not just copying, but adapting.
Exactly. The key takeaway here is that transformation is possible,
It is.
even with constraints.
So we've gone on this deep dive into Malaysia's education system. We've looked at early childhoods. We've talked about those PISA scores. We've compared it to other countries.
Covered a lot of ground.
Where do we go from here? What are those big takeaways, those action items for our listeners?
Right. Because we've unearthed some really fascinating research, we've uncovered potential solutions.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? The reports we've examined, they do offer some promising paths forward. The World Bank, for example, highlights 3 key areas that deserve our attention if we're serious about really nudging those bamboo shoots, so to speak, towards a brighter future for Malaysian education.
Let's hear it. What are those 3 areas?
All right. First up, increased investment in-service teacher training and support.
Okay.
We've talked about some of the hurdles educators are facing, but the answer isn't just lightening their load, right? It's about giving them the tools and the resources they need to not just survive, but to excel.
To thrive in their roles.
Exactly. So continuous learning for teachers, mentorship opportunities, creating that culture where they feel empowered to grow and to refine their craft.
It's about really professionalizing teaching,
Exactly.
making it, something that people aspire to.
Absolutely. The second key area is technology. We're living in a digital age. Education needs to catch up.
It does. But I think there's also that fear of, oh, we're just going to throw a tablet in the classroom and call it a day. And that's not what we're talking about here, right?
No, not at all. We need to be strategic about this.
Right.
When used thoughtfully, EdTech can really personalize that learning experience. It can provide access to this wealth of resources, and it can connect students and teachers in new and innovative ways.
Yeah. And it's about training teachers to use those tools effectively.
Absolutely.
You don't want overwhelmed teachers. We want tech-savvy teachers.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And then finally, we need to move beyond this teaching to the test mentality.
That's a big one.
It is a big one, but it's about recognizing that education isn't just about memorizing facts to pass an exam.
Right.
It's about fostering critical thinking, creativity, problem-solving skills, and just a genuine love of learning.
It's about having those skills that you need for the real world.
Exactly. A world that is changing rapidly. And we've got to be adaptable, we've got to be innovative. So think of these three areas as seeds of change.
I like that.
With nurturing, they have the potential to really blossom into this thriving education system.
That's a great visual. So those are some really great starting points. But the million-dollar question is, how can we, as individuals, as communities, how can we play a part in making sure that those seeds are planted and they grow?
That's a question worth pondering.
It is.
But before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with one final thought, something to really chew on. If you were the architect, you had the power, you were designing Malaysia's education system, what would be its defining characteristic?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What would make it stand out?
That's a question for all of us to think about. That is a powerful question to end on. It makes you really think about, when we talk about education, what do we really value?
It does. And this isn't just about Malaysia. This is a global question. How do we make sure that every single child is able to reach their full potential?
It's a big one. And, I think what this deep dive has really shown is that it's not just on the schools to figure this out.
Oh, absolutely not.
This is a team effort.
This has to be parents, communities, businesses, individuals. We've all got a role to play in this.
Yeah, it's like we're all tending a garden here. Everyone's got to do their part. So let's get practical. What can parents do?
Oh, so much. Parents, you are those first teachers.
Yes.
You can start cultivating that love of learning right at home.
From day one, really.
Exactly.
It starts from the very beginning.
Read to your kids. Talk about what they're learning, foster that natural curiosity.
Let them ask questions. Encourage those questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then communities, right? Communities can provide those extra resources, those mentorship programs, after school clubs, things that can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And businesses too. They're the ones who know what skills are needed out there in the world.
Right. They are at the forefront.
Apprenticeships, internships, those kinds of programs where a kid can actually get that real world experience, I think, are invaluable.
It's that bridge, right?
It's connecting what they're doing in the classroom to what's actually happening out there in the world.
And it makes that transition so much smoother.
It does.
Yeah.
So even if you're not a parent, you're not a teacher, you're not a CEO, I think there are still things that everyone can do.
Absolutely.
You can volunteer.
Support those educational charities.
Right. Advocate for better education policy.
Champion the importance of education.
Yeah. Because ultimately, investing in education is investing in our collective future.
Absolutely. And there was one thing you said earlier that really stuck with me, which is that education isn't this one and done deal.
No, it never stops.
It's a lifelong journey.
It is. And it has to be.
Yeah.
It's not like you graduate and, phew, I'm done with learning now.
The world is changing faster than ever.
It is.
We've got to be adaptable, always willing to learn new skills, new knowledge.
It's like our brains are muscles. You've got to keep flexing them.
That is such a great analogy. You stop using them, they atrophy, they get weak.
They do. They do. So we've talked about the shared responsibility, the fact that learning never ends. There's one more big thing I'm taking away from this whole deep dive.
What's that?
And that is the power of innovation. We have to be willing to try new things in education. We can't just keep doing things the way they've always been done.
Especially not in today's world. The old playbook. It just doesn't cut it.
No, it doesn't. So whether we're talking about, the use of ed tech, using AI in the classroom, trying out new teaching methods, we've got to be willing to, challenge the status quo, be open to new ideas, and just see what works.
Be curious. Ask those what is questions.
Right. Because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing. We want kids to be excited about learning.
Yeah.
We want them to be prepared for the future, whatever that future may hold.
Absolutely. And that's what this has all been about, right? This deep dive has been a journey.
It has.
We've explored Malaysia's education system, the good, the bad, the promising trends, the challenges that are still out there. But Beyond all of that, I think what we've really been exploring is just the power of education,
Absolutely.
the power it has to change a single life.
Change communities to change the world.
Exactly. It's a journey worth taking.
It absolutely is.